All right, guys. So today we're talking about exceptions topic. So what is really an exception? So how do we handle, the errors that we're getting in whenever we're working on programming? It's more important because, say, in the future you may going to write a lot of programming. So somewhere in the situations there is an error raising. So it's unnecessarily or unexpectedly, it's going to stuck complete your program executions. So how do we control your program? It's more important in terms of data science, in terms of Python, anywhere. It's going to give you a lot of importance in it, right? Let's say, what is an exception, first of all? How do you define an exception? So let's say, let me write an exception definition here. Say, an unwanted or unexpected event that disturbs the normal flow of an execution. So somewhere, let's say if I'm writing a sentence here that print off 10 by 0. So when I say this statement, there is no syntactical error. In fact, there is nothing. It could be a logical error, but we understand that the Python never understands it. It understands you're trying to make just a division when kind of work in the print function. But it's going to be failed. So when I comment this line, let's say, and when I'm running my program, it's simply going to raise an exception. Says that zero division by error. It's unable to perform this kind of operation. It's simply raising an error. See, these values might be getting from some other resource. In the real time, somebody passed some values, and simply it's going to performing a division operations where it's actually raising this kind of exception. So we also got it as an error, of course, but ultimately there is no syntactical error. It is only the logical error, but it's still failure, right? So coming to the point, how do we handle these kind of things? It's not only the things, let's say, if you have so many statements in your program and, let's say you have written a class called car or something, so the defining a constructor in it, let's say, self, right, in the print, I'm saying that car object. See, these are the statements that is there after this fourth line. So when I run this program, it doesn't even execute this. Say, let's say if I have another statements over here, like I'm calling and creating an object. So it has to print this statement because we're creating an object. Of course, but when I run this program, it's got stuck there. It's not even executing this, right? It's more important that, you have written 50 lines of code. At the very first line or second line, you got an error. So how about the remaining 48 lines? Right? So it's more important how do we handle these kind of exceptions in the Python or data science, right? So when you're talking about an exceptions, how do we define in a sense? It is an unwanted or unexpected event that disturbs the normal flow of execution is called as an exception. So what if I say the exceptional handling? So when we say handling, so we are actually providing an alternative way. We're providing just an alternative way. That means instead of doing these operations, just try to do some other operations. So we know that it is not going to execute the statement. That is the reason. How do we handle in sense? We come to the point that way anyway. So the point is here, if it is unable to perform these operations, so we can say that instead of performing this thing, try to perform something else. So how do we handle that? We'll come to the point. Let me go and delete all these things right away. And I'm going to write good other thing, right? Let me take the test class. Yeah, I'm defining a, let's say, a method called, let's say, if I'm saying here, the self dot do stuff. What does it mean, guys? What I'm trying to do? Can you guess it? Vaibhav, Pranav?
Hmm. Are you exception handling maybe?
it's not handling. It's something that we are going to call a method. The self is, I said, the self is here or here at the down level. The self is a keyword. It always refers to current object. That means the current object of do stuff. When I'm putting this parenthesis, you're trying to call a method because you're trying to call the method of the current object. So where is this method? I haven't written it yet. So I'm going to return that. I'm going to write that statement right now. So let's say def do stuff self, right? Then if I say the self dot do more stuff, I'm saying self again here. Sorry, my bad. So simply here as well, I'm calling do more stuff method of this current object. So what is the current object in sense? The current object is test object because we're writing all these things within the test class. The current object is always this class object, right? Do you remember that point? It's very careful and it's very important as well. And the def, I'm doing this do more stuff. The self, I'm defining it, and I'm saying that print 10 by 0. Intentionally, I'm raising an exception. We know that. So first of all, say I'm coming to the extreme left indentation. Now I'm saying that here t is equals to the test object I'm creating, because in order to call any of the method, I must have to create an object because these are the instance methods. Isn't it, Vaibhav? Pranav? Yeah. So
Yes.
how do we call this stuff method in a sense? Let's say the stuff method. Is it simple, right? Because it's a self method. That is, it's an instance method. In order to call this instance method, we must have to create an object for the test object, test class. So we created an object. How do we call instance? Just put a dot and call the method. So instead of creating so many other objects of the same class, I'm creating a single object. I'm calling that method. So I call this method, very fine, no problem. Yeah. Now, by calling this 14th line, by creating this 14th line, it's simply calling this stuff method of this class. Now, the stuff method, it is explicitly calling the do stuff method. It is simply jumping from 7th line to the 8th line. Then you're calling the do more stuff. The do more stuff, the statement it is going to raise an exception. So ultimately, it's going to be fail. Yeah. It is simply going to be fail the execution. Yes. Yes, guys. Yeah. So if I'm running the program, say we got so many errors, right? So first of all, understand this traceback. The traceback, the error it got raised. It is more important to understand it because so many situations, so many areas, and wherever whatever the program that you write it, you definitely see an error. Without seeing an error, without intentionally or unintentionally, unexpectedly, you might see many errors. You need to understand how it is raising an exception as well. See, first of all, look at here. You're calling, so it's ultimately we know that it's a zero division error. It's a division by zero. This is a description. What is this? If I say this, it's a description of an error. This is something exception name we call it as. Right? Exception name we call it as. This is a traceback information, how it got failed, it's trying to explain us. Right? See, look at here the point. You call the t dot stuff. Where you got called? At the 14th line. Because of you call this, right? It is raising indirectly an exception. However, I'll come to the point that way. Now, you look at this. This is something where actually the exception is raising. So it is raising at the 11th line, the line at which the exception occurred. That is this. Let me close this, because you might get confused. Right. Say the 11th line here, it is raising an exception. Directly or indirectly, it doesn't matter, but it's raising an exception. So it is raising an exception. And coming to the point, who called this stupid do more stuff method? Who called this? It called by the do stuff method, right? Indirectly, it is also responsible because it is calling that method. That is the reason it's raising an exception. If this method doesn't call by somebody else, there is no chance of executing this statement as well. So that is the reason the do more stuff. Coming to the point, the line number 9, right? Look at this, the do stuff, right? This one, yeah, it is a responsible. And coming to the point, who called this do stuff stupid method? It called by the stuff. Ultimately, it is also responsible indirectly, isn't it so? And who called this stuff method? In a sense, it's called by us, of course. We're not stupid, of course, but I'm saying it. See, ultimately, by calling this stuff method indirectly, it is raising an exception. The traceback information, in a sense, it is telling us at which lines the exception occurred, directly or indirectly. Because the do stuff method is executing this statement, it's raising an exception. It is responsible, of course, and it called by the do stuff. The do stuff is also responsible, right? And called by the stuff method. The stuff is also responsible. Then it called by us over at 14th line. It is also responsible. That means 14th line and the 7th line, because we're calling at this point this do stuff. At the 9th line, we're calling it do more stuff. And at this point, 11th line, it's actually raising an exception. Look at this, 11th line, 9th line, 7th line, 14th line. Ultimately, what is this in a sense? It is a zero division error. We can even edit this, the console points in the Sublime text. It's not something that we are changing something, the predefined code. No, it's not something that way. I'm just writing for your reference. It is an exception name. Something which is not handled by us, it has to handle somehow. If it is not handling it, how do we come, let's say you have written 50 lines of code, if it is raising some exception, how do we come to know it is something there's an error? It has to know, right? That is a reason Python interpreter, take care of this particular role anyway. This is an exception name that is already there in the Python, Python standard library. In exceptions, it is a zero division error. We know that it's unable to convert this into perform this operation because it's a 10 by 0. Anything by 0, it is infinity. So it is giving a description also saying that division by 0. We call it as this is a description of an error. This is an exception name. But how it is happening completely, but how it is actually understandable in the sense. So let me write some few sentences over here. Say, according to the Python interpreter, the method at which, right? The method at which the exception raised, that method is responsible to handle that exception. The method at which, this is a method that is actually raising an exception. The method at which the exception raised, the method is responsible to handle. This method is responsible to handle that exception. If it is not handling that exception, let's say, let me write the story also. If that method, let's say, if that method is not handling that exception, Python interpreter, who is that? The Python interpreter, who is responsible to execute your complete program. The Python interpreter is going to abnormally terminate that method. Abnormally terminate that method without executing further lines of code, right? Let's say, I'll come to the point. In this method, we have only one statement. Let's say I have another statement also. Hello, yeah? So if I run the program again, it's going to be same. There is no chance. It's simply saying that, it is this and this and this all. But what about this? It is not an error, right? But it's not able to execute it because it got stuck at the 11th line. So how come it's going to reach at the 12th line? That is the reason the Python interpreter, if it is not able to execute this statement, it's simply going to abnormally terminate that method. If it is not handled by, let's say I'm saying it, we're not handling it anyway right now. I'm going to come to the point once I finish this conversation, right? The complete story of how it is actually processing the complete exception, how it is raising an exception is more important. The method at which that exception raised, the method is responsible to handle that exception. If it is not handling that exception, it is simply going to terminate it by the Python interpreter, right? Right?
Yeah.
Simply going to terminate by the Python interpreter without executing the further lines of code. Very fine. So then also there is not yet finished. There is also then after terminating this particular method, it checks. Who checks? The Python interpreter. Python interpreter checks that who called this method, because unless and until this method called by somebody, it is not going. There is no chance of executing this method. So definitely somebody called this method. Well and good. Then after terminating this particular method by the Python interpreter, it checks that who called this method, right? It called by do more stuff is method called by the do stuff method, because otherwise it's not going to be executed, right? So it simply checks. See, it is asking the Python interpreter asking do stuff method. Hey, do stuff method, say because you call this do more stuff method, it is raising an exception. It is not handling this exception. It is not handling this error. So because you call this, you are the indirect person. You have to handle this. Do you have any exception handling code? Handling code. I'm talking about handling code. That means something which we can actually provide an alternative way, right? Or you can actually handle it. How do we handle it? It's a different thing. But the point is here, it is asking the do stuff that it is you're indirectly raising this exception, but it is not handling. Are you handling it or not? If you're not handling it, I also terminate your method abnormally. Even if you have any statements over here, let's say print off. Let's say it's a do stuff method, let's say. Yeah. Still, it is not going to be executed because there is no chance to come to this point and executing this, unless it is going to be successfully executed, this 9th line, there is no chance of executing this line as well. So it is simply again going to terminate this do stuff method as well, because it's not handling any exception. It's not handling this error particularly, isn't it so? Yeah. So the point is, who called this do stuff method? Okay. It checks that and keep on checks the track, because indirectly those are responsible, because say the point is, unless and until you call this do stuff method, there is no chance of calling this do more stuff method also. That is the reason the Python interpreter checking who called this do stuff method. So it simply checks that, okay, stuff is calling it. It is asking stuff that, you're indirectly raising an exception, right? You're also a responsible person to handle that exception. Are you handling this code or not? The stuff method says that, I don't have anything such, so you can do whatever you want it. All right. It is also going to terminate this stuff method as well. Even if you have any statements over here, it's not going to be executed, right? It's not going to be executed. Well, then who called this stuff in a sense? Definitely at the 14th line, it has come. This side, it's the 21st line right now. Because of this statement, it is calling this, and it is calling this, and it is calling this. It is executing this statement. It is raising an exception. If you do not call this method, right, simply, nothing going to be happen. It's simply as it is. There is no chance of raising an exception also. Because, isn't it so, guys? So the point is ultimately you're the one actually causing this error. So you're also responsible. Yes, at the 21st line. So it is simply saying that way, right? So let's see. See the 21st line, 7th line, and there's 10th line, and coming to the point here, 13th line. Yeah, it's completely doing same thing. Say 21st. Because of this, it's causing. So it's coming back in the reverse order. Because of this, because it's raising an exception, it is not handling it. It's completely terminated, right? That is do more stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Then this is called at this particular stage where the 10th line, this is 10th line. Because of this, this is happening, right? This is responsible. And this is called by the do stuff. This do stuff is responsible. This is called by the 21st line. This is also responsible. So it's simply telling that. Now the point, how come it's going to raise an exception in sense? If none of the methods, the method at which the exception raised, if that is not handling that exception itself, the Python interpreter invoke. Let me write that statement. None of the methods or none of the statements have been handled by the user, the Python interpreter invokes, the default exceptional handler. It is a part of the Python interpreter only. If none of them are handled by user, the Python interpreter invokes the default exception handler, and the default exception handler then it raises corresponding error, because it knows that okay, this is the something where actually happening because it's a zero division error, right? It simply invoke the corresponding error, right, and print complete information onto the console. Yeah.
Okay.
Right. Just a second, please. So coming to the point, how do we handle that exception? So we have seen that how it is raising an exception. It doesn't matter. It has to raise an exception at the class level. There is no such thing. Even at the function level, even at the global statement. See here, if I say the print by 10 by 0, I'm saying it, we can raise any kind of error. We have seen so many errors like name error, attribute error, indentation errors, right? System error, overflow error, unbound local errors, right? We have so many other things. I'm just trying to raise an exception simply by writing a simple sentence over here. See, it is also something. Who has to handle it? It's nobody handling it. In fact, it's a global statement, right? Nobody's handling it. If nobody's handling it, then it is itself an error, because it's not going to be continue the execution because it's got stuck at the 5th line itself. How come it's going to execute all of this? There is no point. So now if I run this program, there is no point that it's going to reach the 26th line. Unless it is going to be successfully executed, then the point is the 26th line come to the picture for the execution. But it's got stuck at the 5th line itself. Then it's not handling it. Simply it's going to raise an error at the 5th line. See. All right. 1 minute. See. Right. I did not save the program just previously. See, it doesn't even know whether this kind of statement it is going to raise an exception. We know that, but it's got stuck at the 5th line itself. It is raising that only the point. It is not even raising this one because it doesn't reach this stage. It doesn't reach this point to execute this. So it got stuck at the very 5th line. The rest of the code waste, right? So it's more important. It's have to understand. It's more important to how to handle the exception. You have to guess it some situations where, right? So that is a point. So let us come to. I'm going to delete this statement over here. Don't worry. We'll come to the point all the cases. So how do we handle this exception which is raising, right? So we know that it is raising at the 14th line. Yeah, well and good. So how do we handle any exception in the Python is, say, the try. So what is this try in the sense? We call it as a try block. But however, so what is the point of, what is the use of this try in the sense? It's going to give a try of execution. If it is understands, if it got a signal that, okay, it is raising an exception, it is simply going to escape this execution at the 15th line. It's going to do something else. What is that something else in the sense? Say, except. What is it? Except. Except at the 14th line, try 15th line, it's trying to execute it. It got a signal. If it is getting a signal that it is raising an exception at some point where it is not guaranteed that always it's going to be raising an exception at the 15th line, because these values getting from somewhere the situations. Yeah, at the 16th line, it is immediately going to jump to the except block. I'm saying that 10 by 2. There's no problem at the 10 by 2, right? So if I'm simply running my program, now it's got successfully done. Yes, guys?
Yeah.
Pranav?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it simply understand that we know that it's still raising an exception, but the try will only give a try. It never 100% execute and jump into except. No, it's no such thing as that. It is going to give a try. It got a signal. If it is getting a signal that it is raising an exception, okay, I should not execute this. Let me jump directly to, because it's unable to perform this operation. It's got a signal, then it's immediately jumping to this 16th line, except, and printing the statement of this. Printing in the sense, I'm just printing it. If you're doing something else, it's going to do something else. And you can also say that there are also chances getting an exception in the except block also. At that situation, nobody can help it, right? Right? If you wanted to handle again in the except, you can do that still. That's a different point of view. See, but we have in the exceptions topic, the try except. We also has this else part, right? What is this else part? I'll tell you, don't worry. Print, let's say, doing more other operations at this point. We also have finally. What is that? Finally, I always execute. The finally block which always executes, it doesn't matter. Even though an exception raised, or not at try block. The point is, if it is the try block is giving a try to execute this, the 15th line, right? If it is raising an exception, it is immediately jump to the except block, right? The finally block which always executes, it doesn't matter if it is raising an exception, if it is not raising an exception. If you write the finally block, it's always executes. That means why we need to have this finally block? There is a make sense. Now let's say your connection to the database, let's say somewhere the server connections is limited. Only the 10 people at a time has to access the server and trying to make an operations, whatever you do, it's okay, right? Let's say you connected to the database, the server, and you're trying to make some operations, you've got somewhere stuck. See, it is something that you have to give an opportunity to the other threads. I mean, the other users, they can access to the server, database, they can actually do some kind of things. Yeah. See, unnecessarily got stuck. You don't know what to do. At that particular point, if something gets stuck at anywhere in your situations, if you write the finally block, it is always associated with the try and accept things. You need to understand it. You cannot directly write here as a finally. There is no such thing, right? These things is always associated with the try accept things. Yeah. The finally block always executes. That means, see, if something got stuck somewhere, if you wanted to close the connections between your server or database, let's say, yeah, That situations where you can actually close them in the finally. If it is raising an exception, if it is not raising an exception, it doesn't matter. It's always guaranteed to execute. That means it's guaranteed that it's definitely going to be executed. Yeah, yes, guys.
Okay.
Okay.
All right then. So let me say right now. See, I always execute even an exception raised or not at try block. At try block in sense as part of try block. Let's say, but when this else part is going to be executed, if you can observe the execution here, let me drag this little up. All right. So when this is going to be executed, so if no exception which is raising at, I'm changing the code at the 15th line divided by 2. If no exception raised at the 15th line, right? Then the else part is guaranteed to execute. Also the finally, but except is only the case where actually going to, except is only the case where if any exception raised at as part of try block, then only this is come to the picture. Otherwise, there is no chance of executing this line, right? If I'm running back my code, see, doing more other operation at this point, and the finally is also executed, right? Good to go, guys?
Yeah.
And the hello. Then if you have any other statements as part of this method I'm saying it, you can actually get executed these things. Because I handled this point, there is no chance, that we are not actually getting stuck somewhere because I'm providing an alternative ways, right? Here, right? And we have n number of statements to the do more stuff. You can actually do that. Let's say you can ask me a question. So very nice, but why can't you put the complete code from the fourth line to the 33 line? Why can't you put complete code in the try block? Try, except, else, things and all. See, well and good. That's a very good question. Let's say I have another statements over here saying that the print of, let's say it's a do more stuff operations, right? In the try block only I'm saying it, okay? And having hello or something else stupid statements, okay, never mind. Let's say, now if it is raising an exception, yeah? At the 15th line, at the try block, we have 3 statements, right? When it comes to the do more stuff, simply it is trying to execute the try block, that is 15th line. Now it came to know that, okay, it is raising an exception. I have to immediately search for the corresponding except block. Corresponding except block. It is going to jump directly to the 18th line. It never come back again to perform these operations. I mean to say, it's never come back to execute these statements. Say, so we know that this is raising an exception. Now it is going to, execute this line, and it's going to, execute the finally block and keep on executing the rest of the statements. Say the 5.0 because it's executed the 19th line, right? Else part is not going to be executed because it's only the point where it's not raising any exceptions as part of try block. Then it is coming to the picture. Then I always executes the finally block, definitely, yeah. Hello, things. And does it anywhere it's got executed these things?
No.
So you need to understand it. You try block as much as less possible. I mean to say, it should be as less as possible. If you're putting the complete code, complete 50 lines of code in the one try block and trying and accepting, see, in the try block, if it is raising an exception, the rest of the statements in the try block never ever going to be executed, even if it is abnormal termination, even if it is successful termination.
Okay.
Yeah. Don't ever try to put the complete code, the larger code in the try block. Wherever it is necessary, wherever you feel that it may raise an exception in the future, then only that particular statement, even if you're writing 10 try things, handling it 10 times, you're handling in the same program, it doesn't matter because you feel that it may raise an exception in the future. I'm not talking about the syntactical errors. Something that you're trying to deal with external files. All right. In the next session, we're talking about the data structures, right? In the further 2 sections, we're going to deal with the external files also. We're going to search for the CSV, handling with the text files and all, right? If somewhere in situations a file may not be exist, what is the case? but it is on your system, but you're trying to handling with its servers where you cannot guarantee all the time that file definitely exists there. But your
Yeah.
program says that, okay, I have to retrieve this file from the so and so server. But where is the file? If it is not there, what do you have to do? You have to think that in a, very, very prior, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
If you do not have an idea, see, it's okay. I'm saying it. So whenever you're dealing with the external files, that is one point. Whenever your code is making some logical operations, you have to think that is there any chances that the data which is coming up, which is going to raise an exception? Okay, if that is a case where you have to handle those particular lines, don't ever try to put the complete code into one single try block and handle them. It's a stupid idea. It's a very bad idea. Don't ever try to do that. Right? With you
Mhm.
guys?
Yeah.
All right then.
My
So,
question is,
yes.
uh, in the finally block, if I put print
Mhm.
10 divide by 0, will it still get
Okay.
executed
There
through
is
that?
also chance of raising an exception at the finally block also. There
Yeah.
is also raising an exception at the else spot also. In the except block also. Except block. Right?
Yeah.
There are also raise an exception in the except block also. There is no guarantee that, but it is something that we're thinking to raise an exception. I mean, we're thinking to handle that exception. So if I'm
Yeah.
writing it here, the print of, right, let's say the 10 by 0, bad, right? So it is also raising an exception. It is
Yeah.
something that if you feel that it may raise an exception at the except block, else spot, finally block, anywhere in the situations, you
Mhm.
can handle it here also, saying that try,
Okay.
right? Again, else, sorry, except. If you're writing a try, you must have to write except block. If you
Okay.
don't, if you're not writing it, let's say, see, it's definitely going to give a try this. You know that? But where
Hmm.
is the except block? That means you're trying to handle it. Alternative thing. Where is that alternative thing? Definitely going to be abnormal termination.
Yeah.
See, it is simply 15th line. It jumps from 15th line to the 18th line. It is
Yeah.
executed in 19th line. Okay, you're putting try something. It is definitely execute this. But where is the accept block? There is no accept block. It's got stuck. Again, this is also going to be failure.
Yeah.
So that means it's not going to be happen anything. But if you write, if you write accept block, that means you're trying to handling it. Let's say, right, this, right?
Yeah.
It's your wish. Else and finally blocks are not mandatory. It's optional that if you want to write it down, write it. Otherwise, just simply put it up. Yeah.
Okay.
So it is not guaranteed that only it is going to raise an exception at the try block. But I'm saying it, most of the cases you'll come to know. If you're dealing with external files, you definitely know that what if the case the file is not exist, right?
Hmm.
That's the question, right? So what
Yeah.
if you're trying to make some logical operations, like this? What if the case if this is the thing, this coming by division by 0, right?
Yeah.
Yes. And those kind of, not only these situations, I'm saying it, in many other situations. I gave you the assignment also for the Pranav, right? You see this so many exceptions, right?
Okay.
Attribute errors, those things, so many other things. See, it's not something that for every sentence, what if the case do stuff is not there? Don't think it in don't think in that way. I'm saying it. If it is not there, it's okay. That kind of error is okay. If it is there and it is raising some kind of thing, that you have to take care, isn't it?
Yeah.
Don't ever try to ask me a question. See, what if if you're trying to call the stuff method and the stuff method is itself not there in the class? It's not there. See, nobody expect to call some method without knowing that it is there. Yes?
Yeah.
Yes, guys, Pranav?
Yeah.
Right. So this is something uncontrollable because it is not a syntactical mistake. It's a programmatically, it's a very perfect. There is no chance, nobody can say that this is incorrect. It is very perfect. Only the point it is unable to perform this operation. Yeah. And if I'm trying to open any file, because you guys don't know, I'm trying to say, let's say file is equals to anything that can actually take an open file. Open, right? Open of this, let's say the sample.txt. I don't know whether this file is there or not. I'm trying to open this .txt file from the current directory. Current directory is Python work folder exceptions. Let me run this program. See this, there is no such file exist. Yeah, there is no such file exist in my current directory,
Okay.
Yeah.
right? So it is trying to raise an exception. You're trying to open it. Open is a function which is going to open that file. Okay. Don't worry. We'll come to the point, when we discuss about the data structures. So this is the situations where you have to, if it is not there, why do you want to compromise yourself and, uh, rest of the program? We have so many other lines of code that may be doing something else, right? So why do you want to compromise?
Class में थोड़ा
Sorry, Gaurav, Vaibhav?
Hello? Yeah.
Yeah, please. You said something?
No.
Yeah. So at this fourth line, there is no such file exist in the current directory. It's simply raising an exception because it doesn't know what to do if it is not there. Yeah. So don't ever try to do this. So I'm saying it. The try block must and should be as less as possible. Right? The concised. Right? Only the one statement that you feel like it may raise an exception in the future. Only handle that particular point of statement only. Don't ever try to put the complete code into one try block and don't play a smart line, right? Good to go?
Yeah.
All right then. So I said that the method at which the exception raised, the method is responsible to handle that exception. If that method is not handling that exception, the Python interpreter is abnormally going to terminate this particular method, right? And checks that who is the caller of this method. Who is the caller of this method? Two stuff, right? All right. So let me going to comment everything here, right? Because I gave this statement as something this, isn't it so? It is going to check after terminating this particular method, do stuff method, because it's not handling that code. The Python interpreter checks who is the caller of this method. Who called this method instance? Who is the caller of this method? So let me completely put stay, here, right? And let me put the statement copy over here, isn't it? I'm just commented all these lines. In fact, yes, guys.
Yeah.
Definitely, the do stuff is going to raise an exception. The do stuff is not handling this particular statement. It is not going to execute this particular statement. Also, a Python interpreter is going to abnormally terminate this particular method because it's not handling it. Then check the next 2 point. It's going to check that who is the caller of this stupid method. The caller of this stupid method is do stuff method.
Yeah.
Right? Then it is asking do stuff method, indirectly you're raising an exception because you're calling this do more stuff. Then it is not handling, you have to handle it because you called it, right? Okay, let me handle it over here.
Mhm.
There is no, so okay, if you're not interested to handle it here, you can handle it here. But look at the execution and look at the the output also for this. All right. So try I'm saying it and except because I'm calling this, it is raising an exception, right? So let me actually handle them. Except, right? Print. You can also say in other ways, say except exception. It is something that a default exception, which is there in the Python, right? Just remember this, exception, which is there in the default in the Python interpreter. As we can actually take a shortcut name for is E, right? Just print E. You will understand what is this E, right? Then we have another statement. This statement belongs to the do stuff, right? So I'm not interested to have the finally statements and the else part statement. It's okay. Don't worry. Yeah, it is not mandatory as said. Right. Now if I'm trying to run my program. Now see, where is this gone? I said at the do more stuff method, the Python interpreter is checking, are you really handling this exception? No. If we are not handling it, rest of the statements in the do more stuff, it's never ever gets executed. It's simply going to be abnormally terminated. 1 point. Yeah. Then it's checking who is the caller of this method, the do stuff. Hey, do stuff, you're indirectly raising an exception at the do more stuff. Are you handling? Look at my code, I'm really handling it. Okay, well and good. And coming to the point here, except I'm saying that this is an exception name as an exception itself, right? It's a superclass for all the exceptions that you're raising it. You're raising it intentionally, or it is raising by implicitly. The exception class is a base class, top class, right? I'm taking as a shortcut as an E. I'm trying to print an E. So I'm going to get that only the description. If ever you're trying to print this way, you're going to get only the description of the exception. It is not giving you the exception name. It is telling you that it's a exception description only, division by 0.
Yeah.
Right? Simple this way. Right?
Okay.
Then you're getting this executed, do stuff method. Then you're trying to get this stuff method. Yeah. Good to go. Well and good. I'm not interested to handle the do stuff method also. Your wish. Don't do that if you're not interested. I'm saying it. Okay. Let's say I'm calling this self do more stuff. Good to go. And we have another statement at the do stuff. Then you know the story, do stuff, do more stuff. It is not handling, abnormally terminated, rest of the program never ever executed. Then it comes to the do stuff says that I don't have any handling code. It's simply going to be abnormally terminated, and this statement is also not going to be executed. And it's coming back to the caller method. The caller method is stuff method. Then at the caller method, I'm trying to handling it. All right, it's giving proper indentation. Let me come up. All right, then. Give me a second. All right, let me check out this statement. Here. Give me a second, guys. Yeah. I'm trying to handle it here. Yeah. Then I'm trying to say I don't want to put this statement also, the 9th statement in the try block. I know that it's simply a print statement. Then I'm saying that except, right? Or I can say that I can also say the specific exception name also here, 0 division by, it's a 0 division error as Z. You can take any shortcut name, print it. Nice. Then let me put this statement at the as part of this method. Then if I'm running back this thing. All right. So what happened exactly? The try, we have it. First of all, say yeah. So I made a mistake here. It's not a spelling mistake. It's a ERR. Okay. This. But the problem is, see, this is not executed. This is also abnormally terminated. Right? You're handling at this particular point. What is the use? Simply I'm saying it that it can actually able to handle at this point, but still we losing, still we lose the executions of at the do more stuff method, do stuff method. Yes.
Yeah.
Right. I'm saying it, we can able to handle it here. That means something that where in a situations where you wanted to handle at this particular point only, you can actually handle it. It's not an issue. Right. You can even say direct exception, or exception is something that is a superclass, base class. I'm saying it. The 0 division error is something you really know it's a 0 division error only. Then this is, let's say it is not 0 division error. Right? Something that I'm trying to open your file. Sample.txt. Right? You don't have that file, first of all. See, simply going to raise an exception because you need to understand it. It is not the exception which is raising, which is not a 0 division error. How come it's going to accept this block? So you can actually have a multiple except blocks. That means you can check that except file not found error. As a specific, I'm saying it. F, right? Print F. And if I'm running back this, then it's definitely there is no such file or directory exist. It's just giving the exception description. Then if you still don't know what exception it is going to raise, put another except block saying that exception. The exception is it's going to handle any kind of exception. Yes, guys?
Yeah.
It's simply going to handle any kind of exceptions. Let's say if I'm going to put this statement at the very first, can you tell me, is it right? See, any exception which is raising at this particular 7th line, the exception can handle? Yes.
Yeah.
What is the point it's going to reach this statement? That means if any exception which is raising as part of try block, it is immediately checking the very first except block. If it is handling, then what is the point it's going to reach these statements? So always it's going to tell this way, right? Don't ever put the broader exception at the very first, right? You have to put this at the last, because first you're checking, you might thinking that, okay, it might zero division error. If it is not, definitely it's going to be a file not found. If it is still not, definitely, and I don't know, because just try to pin me. Let me know. Yeah?
Yeah.
Good to go, Pranav? Pranav,
Yeah.
understanding?
Yeah.
So coming to your point, even if you're not interested to handle at this particular time, at this particular stage, then where you can actually able to handle, guys? Where exactly? Pranav,
Yeah.
if you're not interested to handle at this particular time, at this particular stage, where you can actually able to handle rest? Where else you can actually able to handle this?
Before class, like right in the beginning.
I'm talking about, it is checking that this do more stuff is handling any code. No, abnormally terminated. It is not also not handling it. It's abnormally terminated. It is also not handling it. Abnormally terminated. Let's say.
Yeah.
Then coming to the point here, because it is also responsible, right? You can also handle over here if you want it.
Yeah.
Right? If you're not handling at this particular point, you can actually handle at this particular point also. No problem. Right? Yes?
Yeah.
Yes. So you need to understand, you can even write the multiple except blocks. Something that why you wanted a specific. Let's say you can ask me a question. If something which is handling by exception, any exception which is handled by the exception. So what is the point where you write these specific exceptions? See, let's say if it is a zero division error, I can perform the alternative work to escape from this zero division error. But if I simply writing an exception, whether I have to handle the file not find exception, whether I have to handle the zero division error, how would I know? Yes, guys, Pranav, Vaibhav, Pranav.
Yeah.
See, if I'm not writing any specific exception, if I'm directly putting this exception, because the exception can handle any kind of exception, very fine. But if I'm writing a specific exception, that means, see, if it is, let's say, it's a zero division error, that means it's going to execute this particular line. That means I can handle something related to the zero division error, right? Let's say if it is not zero division error, if it is a file not found error, I'm trying to open any other files maybe. Let's say if I'm trying to open the file from the zero division error, what is the point? Right?
Yeah.
So use for that. So that means if you're writing a specific exception, so if trying to catch it, it's like a try and catching it. So we also call it as an exception propagation, right? If this person not able to handle it, is going to check the next except block. If this person not able to handle it, is going to check the next except block. then this person definitely able to handle it. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good to go. So try to be more specific rather than writing a broader exception all the time, right? So it's better for you because you may going to handle this specifically about the zero division error. If it is a zero division error, then try to be more specific at the very top, then broader exception at the very last. If you're writing the broader exception at the very first, right? Then this person always able to handle any kind of exception. Then there is no point of reaching these exceptions at later. Yeah. Don't ever try to do that. Good to go?
Okay.
All right.